Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast where we cover Saskatchewan current events and politics. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David. My pronouns are they and them, or he and him.
And we do have quite a few stories this time, but again, not all of them are necessarily important to get to, and like it's under a few headings too, so some of them fit under the same thing. There's not a ton of... I was just going to say, there's not a ton of, like, say, COVID stuff, or we're not covering, like, Russia, Ukraine in depth, right? Like,
no. Like, so, we can talk about the Saskatchewan impact of some of these things, but I think there are more qualified voices than us that can go into the greater geopolitical elements, and we can stick to the Saskatchewan angle on things.
That's right.
And so, that's like some of them are still heavily impacting Saskatchewan, but it's
under the COVID. There's
more of the same. Are we
sort of? Yeah, like we've got the NDP calling on the province to return to a daily COVID-19 reporting. The province has gone to weekly.
Yeah, weekly and like delayed by a week as well. So basically when we get reporting, we're finding out where things were almost 2 full weeks ago. So yeah. So it's really not that great. Like if you're going to do by the week, maybe we should actually be getting weekly, like at the week. But also with a lot of this stuff, the numbers aren't going to be accurate anymore anyway, because a lot of this stuff isn't being tracked the way it was before. And now I've heard, like, just through the grapevine, it's hard to get, like, a PCR test if you want one. And, like, it's not a great situation. But no, it sucks. It's a good way of hiding like what the numbers are. It's like so much of this. If the province can pretend there isn't a problem, there's going to be enough of their supporters who can be convinced that there isn't one. Yeah,
that's right. The act like it's normal thing, it's effectively turned everything into everybody just acting like it's normal.
Yeah.
You go to the grocery store now and nobody's wearing, well, not nobody, but the number of masks is greatly diminished, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, for sure. Well, and that kind of ties in almost the opposite of the next sort of bit that we were going to talk about here as well. Even just the idea of wearing masks, like not even, we've now got anti-maskers complaining, not that it's, they're required, but that it makes them sad when people say they should, right?
Yes.
Like it's,
that's right.
We've moved past the, it's my right and freedom to not have to take the barest of minimal health precautions. But now we've moved on to, not only do I not want it to be required, I don't want my feelings hurt by people telling me it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
Even that's considered too far.
Like, you can read the headline. It says, Regina City Councillor says facilities should stop strongly encouraging mask use. For someone like myself that's not wearing a mask, I feel really not welcomed, says Tarina Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
Well, boo fucking who? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just don't feel bad because you feel unwelcome for not wearing a mask. Yeah. It's not... Technically, they can't require it because the fucking government interferes with their right to do that. And it's absurd.
Yeah, it is absurd. Well, like Tarina Shaw's sort of progression to being an anti-mask, I shouldn't say progression to being progression to being a MAGA hat wearer has been, I have the feeling it's less of her opinions are changing over time and more a matter of she's feeling more and more confident in showing her true colors.
Yeah, she's metaphorically taking the mask off.
Yeah. This is, and it seems to be all the wonderful things
going hand in hand, right, with her. Like,
oh yeah,
she's been gradually becoming more and more homophobic openly over time, more and more anti-mask over time. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast, but had a tweet a month or two ago making up this fake story in order to rail against the city's
I don't think we did talk
plastic
about
bags. Oh, I will share the screen cap of it at some point. Yeah, no, she had this tweet where she made up this really long, convoluted story about how there was a single mom that she saw in the grocery store with her magic single mom detecting powers, who got to the till, and because she couldn't get a plastic bag anymore and they were out of paper bags, so this single mom had to buy a reusable bag from the store, which was too expensive, so she had to put her milk back, and I can't remember if it was milk or what it was. And
Right.
Of course, Trina Shaw is telling this story, and I think it was Facebook rather than Twitter.
Oh,
and
okay.
she's describing this entire back and forth conversation between this single mom and the store clerk, and says, I would have boldly offered to buy her a bag, but she was so far away she couldn't hear me, and by the time I got to her, she'd already left the store. I'm like, so it's this weird story where she can somehow hear every single word of the embarrassed mom explaining she doesn't
Right.
have enough money to buy the reusable bag, because of course people shout that type of story, or that type of explanation.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
too far, close enough to hear that, but too far away for her to hear, oh, I'll get that for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Like, this is who Trina Shaw is. And,
This story that definitely happened in real life.
And even before the last election, like even when she was running, had put up posts celebrating transphobes and homophobes, and then when called out on it, blocked the people who called her out.
Right.
Was one of only 2 counselors to vote against the initial municipal conversion therapy ban. Was horrific during the I don't say hearing, during the question period on it, or the discussion.
Yeah,
on
the
it.
conversion period. Yeah,
This is who she is. Like, Trina Shaw had done a moderate job of hiding her who she truly is for a while, but it slowly becomes more and more apparent.
It's
over
definitely
time.
fading. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's. I can't be shocked that she's mad that people encourage her to wear a mask. Not even required. She doesn't even want to be encouraged to wear it anymore.
Right.
Like, that's a violation of. Violation of her right to have happy feelings. I
guess. Yeah.
So,
that's right.
Because we've moved past free speech or free expression, or she can do it. She's allowed to 100% go in, but she doesn't want to have to be sad.
How far? And I've recently experienced this actually. But how far until she reaches abusing people verbally for wearing masks?
I would be shocked if she's not there already. Again, we can't make that accusation because she probably not. Right. She listens, but we cannot make that type of an accusation without evidence. But I would be shocked, or I would not be shocked if something like that came to light.
I was not up close, face to face, verbally abused, but somebody shouted at me from across a parking lot when I was in Weyburn last week because I put a mask on before I went into a convenience store, and they decided that I was worthy of insulting because of that. So
I've had a number of snarky comments
where we live,
yep.
I guess.
Yeah, and it's it is what it is. We're happy. I was going to say also happy COVID anniversary. COVID was, it came out in 2019, but it was almost exactly 2 years ago today when we first started really thinking that the province of Saskatchewan was going to be impacted. We're coming up on the 2-year mark where things started to actually close.
Yep.
And I was looking back over, again, my Facebook memories, and from 2 years ago, was talking about, like, there is a middle ground between absolutely panicking and thinking this is going to be the end of all human life versus, we don't have to worry about it. Let's not even bother. Like there's a middle ground between those two things.
There's a huge swath of ground in between,
and maybe we should aim for some of those.
Yep.
But yeah.
But apparently not. We're just not doing anything now.
Yeah. Also, again, I was looking over some conversations from 2 years ago and talking about like one of the problems, and again, this is getting to the bigger geopolitical stuff, but one of the problems I think we have is we've dodged so many disasters. Like it was a case where I used the modified version of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. What if the story is actually the boy did see the wolf every time, and the wolf just kept getting scared off by the people coming to chase it away? And that last time, it wasn't the boy having done anything wrong any of those previous times. Just people had reached the point where they just weren't running to chase the wolf away anymore, and that's what got the boy eaten and the sheep killed. Yeah. Right? We did take precautions. When SARS was an issue, we did do massive vaccination drives back in 2009 when H1N1. Right. Like there have been other things that could have been disastrous, and we've taken steps to ward them off, and we just didn't do enough of it this time because we'd just gotten so used to everyone overreacts when these things happen, so let's not worry about it.
Okay, so we got one more COVID story. Likely, COVID Saskatchewan emergency rooms are seeing more children under the age of 5 and with respiratory-like illnesses. So that's concerning. Mm-hmm. Any COVID-like illness presentation in emergency rooms where you may not have been screened in every case, it is likely COVID-19. You're going to get, with stuff like that, you're going to get the people who are saying, oh, well, they call everything COVID if it's like this, right? Even if you haven't had the tests and whatever. Yeah. And so this isn't going to convince anybody that already decides not to believe it.
I guess I know, okay, let's pretend you're right. Then there's this other epidemic that's sweeping through the province, affecting the respiratory systems of children. So then we still have an emergency on our hand. Like, if this isn't COVID, right. I think it is. But let's pretend those people are right for a second. That's worse. Right? That's right. A scarier situation. Then it's this new disease or new virus that we don't understand yet. We don't have vaccines for yet. We haven't been spending 2 years of intensive research on. And now all of a sudden there's this new virus that's sweeping through children in the province that is dangerous and sending kids to the emergency room. That should have us more scared. That should have us in an even greater lockdown than we've been having for COVID.
True.
And again, just go back to, okay, let's pretend you're right for a second. And again, I don't think they are. So I think we need to be aware that, the actions, or more importantly, the lack of actions we've been taking around COVID is once again putting children at risk. So anyways,
it makes me think of, I just was listening to something a little while ago about, where was it? I can't remember, it's Newfoundland. It might be Newfoundland. And there's a thing that is happening to people of a variety of ages where they're having Alzheimer-like symptoms, and their brain function is deteriorating very rapidly. And it's happening to young people, old people, all kinds of people from different backgrounds. And it's very concerning, but the province and the government and whatnot, they're all kind of, just ignoring it, calling it something else, or saying, well, we don't know what it is. It's not environmental. It's not a virus or whatever. They're just saying this thing, making excuses fundamentally.
Yeah, that's scarier. Like,
that's scarier. Exactly.
That's scarier. Like, and that's
this is terrifying.
Yeah. And like really cheesy, weird analogy. There's a rule in like tabletop role playing games like D&D and whatnot. It's like if you give it stats, you can kill it.
Right.
And until it has stats, you can't. Once we know what a disease is, humans are pretty damn effective at fighting viruses.
Right.
Like, we're not perfect. It's taken us 40 years to really get a handle on HIV, but like even that, probably one of the worst pandemics, of a long time. I don't even know what, like, and we now are starting to get vaccines for HIV even. Like, when we know what something is, and we've had we've had retrovirals for a while, like, we've had various things to fight it for quite a while. One of the things that delayed fighting it was people didn't research it. We didn't look into it. We figured
denial that it was a problem.
Yeah. And as soon as we started as a society, like the greater we, putting time, money, and energy into fighting it, we started getting good at fighting it. People talk about COVID, that this was rushed and too quick. Like, that's a good thing. That was humans decided we wanted to solve this problem, then we solved it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When humans decide to start solving a problem, we're usually actually pretty good. Like, humans have an impressive track record. I know we often start being a little negative or sounding a little negative, but as a whole, we're pretty amazing when we want to be. We just have to want to be.
Right.
And that's the key with so much of this. We need to put the research in. We need to name it. We need to start looking into what it is. And once we've named it, we're good at fighting it.
That's right. The driver who caused the deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash is denied his bid to stay in Canada. And I mean, technically, I guess there's people saying that this is how the law is supposed to go. He's been convicted of a crime with a jail term over 6 months. So now deportation is the correct thing to do under the law. But his wife put a video out requesting like a re-evaluation. Or yes, like, this is not a person that is a danger to society. There was an accident. I mean, we've talked about this a million times before, right? Like, he feels remorse. He did the right thing. If he had pled not guilty, he probably wouldn't have gone to jail, right? Like, this is a result of him wanting to do the right thing, and now he's going to be deported or potentially deported.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. If Sea-Doo is deported, we should probably deport Scott Moe as well. He did the same thing. Like, we literally have a premier who did the exact same thing. The premier only killed one person, and instead of the number that Sea-Doo killed. But
the infraction is the same. Yeah. We don't penalize people for the number of victims in an accident.
Yeah.
Like, he's not charged with X number of cases of manslaughter or what have you, right? Like, this entire case is actually like unheard of according to any legal sources that I've listened to. So,
yeah. So it's frustrating. At the end of the day, it is like, as impactful as it is to the individual who's affected. It is largely more about the principle of the thing than the individual.
Yeah.
He'll go home to India. He'll still have a life in India. It's not the life he would have wanted here.
Right.
It still sucks. It is the principle of the thing for me. It's the idea that someone is a permanent resident with an asterisk. The fact that, again, we have a premier who committed the same crime, like blew through a stop sign, killed a woman, faced virtually no consequences for it. Was charged with, I can't remember if it was like reckless driving with undue care and attention or whatever he was charged with. But again, because he was a young white dude who was friends with cops in the area, didn't actually face consequences beyond a fine. And
a charge that often does not result in a jail term. Right?
No.
Like that's not going to end up with a jail term in most cases, but in this case.
Yeah. But like in the case of the premier, it was someone who had also had 2 drunk driving arrests.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so we have a premier who has driving with undue care and attention and killed someone, and 2 drunk driving arrests. Like similar circumstances, was, blew through a stop sign at a busy highway, running into someone, killing them.
Yeah.
In the case of C2, it was late at night. The way we treat truck drivers. Again, we had this giant truck convoy rally recently that was apparently fighting for the rights of truck drivers, who are often forced, in order to keep their jobs, to drive ungodly number of hours. Like there are health and safety issues around how we make truck drivers drive.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we have people on the road for 16 hours straight, or
insane,
more in some cases, is dangerous.
Yeah.
And was in that circumstance. So he was tired. Like it wasn't as if he was doing anything intentionally reckless. He was driving when he was too tired to be on the road.
Yep.
In Scott Moe's case, it sounds like it was similar. He was leaving somewhere early in the morning, was probably too tired to have been on the road. Again, we don't have a lot of information about what circumstances were around it. We just know it was really, really early in the morning. But again, we go back to permanent residency shouldn't have an asterisk, as a principle.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so often in these circumstances, we see a lot of laws where it's the most outrageous circumstances are the ones that become the thin edge of the wedge, because we're going to have this case become official on the record. We're going to now have someone deported because fighting this one is going to be difficult.
Yep.
And now going forward, that's the new normal. So now you do have permanent residency from this point onward, having the asterisk on it.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's
something to be
aware. I
don't
have much more to say on it. It's frustrating.
It's something that actually, like, people who are new Canadians or have just recently got their permanent residency are going to have to keep in mind, because if you do cross certain lines, then you are at danger of losing your permanent residency. So,
yeah.
It's a real danger.
I'm having people say, well, then just don't commit crimes, which, like, that's all fine and good. Please, you better not have been supporting that convoy that just happened, because there's a whole bunch of crimes being committed there too, right?
Yep, so that's right.
Let's be consistent on that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not fighting for the convoy drivers to be deported either, right? If there was an American by birth who was a convoy driver who got arrested and, is a permanent Canadian resident, like, I don't want them deported either.
No.
I do say if CETA is going to be deported, they better sure as fuck be too. Like, if we're going to start going down this road,
if that's the rule, that's the rule.
Let's apply it consistently. But like, it's a shitty rule. We shouldn't have this rule. I hope it's fought and overturned.
Yeah.
For the sake of it just being removed as a law.
Yeah, for sure. This sounds frustrating as well. Sask people struggling to make ends meet on minimum wage. The provincial minimum wage is $11.81 per hour. I don't think there's too much to say, like, about the... Like, it's just so obvious that $11.81 isn't enough to live on. Like, it's just... I don't know how anybody can expect that to be okay. This interview, or this article actually goes through and discusses a number of cases with discusses with a number of people who are having trouble living on the minimum wage paycheck. I've said it for years. Like, I don't know how anybody lives on minimum wage, because I've been very privileged in my income for the most part over the last few years, with some 6-month exceptions, 7-month exceptions.
Yeah,
but even when I'm making the good, like the big oil field wages, like, it just blows me away, because I'm having trouble. I'm still struggling. So how can somebody who's making less than a third of what I make, survive?
Yep.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. No. And how does a political party that's been in power for 15 years now say they're doing a good job with the economy when we're in second last place when it comes to wage?
Yeah. No, that makes no sense.
Right? Like, no one economic measurement should be the be all and end all. So I'm not saying minimum wage is the only economic factor that should be used to evaluate how well a government is doing when it comes to managing the economy. But to say that shouldn't be a factor, and I hear the right wingers going, oh, okay, well, it should be market rates, and minimum wage shouldn't even exist. Okay, fine. We shouldn't have anyone at minimum wage then if we're having a successful economy. Like, if your economy's good and you're saying why isn't the market rate for wage greater than our minimum wage then, and then minimum wage is irrelevant? Again, we don't have a strong economy if wage is not keeping pace with inflation.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
not.
Right. Yeah,
it just isn't.
Yeah,
and both the minimum wage and the median wage, like even taking minimum wage off the table, median wage is not either.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So those two are both important factors. That your middle point and your bottom point, neither one are growing with inflation.
Yeah, that's right.
Your upper end sure is.
Sure, yeah. The inflation rate for this year, like that, they're raising the central bank interest rates, right? Because the inflation rate was like 5% or something.
5.1, yeah.
But this, in October, the Saskatchewan government raised the minimum wage by 3.14%. So it didn't match inflation, even if you're going to use a similar gauge, right? Like,
and inflation is a tricky measurement. I think I've talked about this before too, where inflation isn't actually one statistic, right? It's an amalgam of multiple measurements. We look at a basket of goods, and you can measure inflation. Inflation is really easy to manipulate. You just change what basket or what items are in your basket you're measuring, which is why we have some fixed ones or some consistent baskets that get measured across various indices. But at the end of the day, though, inflation is growing higher on staple goods and slower on luxury goods, which means not only is inflation already high at 5%, inflation is higher. Like, realistically, how it affects people in their pocketbook is actually growing at a rate higher than 5% for the lower end of the income spectrum. So if you're at or below the median income, inflation is actually growing at a rate higher than 5% for you. And if your income is at or greater than the median income, inflation is actually at a slightly less than 5% rate for you. Like, these are statistics that need to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. But
for sure,
again, that makes it even more important that we have minimum wage at the very least keeping pace with inflation. Again, I think what we should be looking at is not only fighting for a $15 an hour minimum wage. We should be fighting for a $15 minimum wage that is tied to inflation. That it's not political anymore, that you take politics out of minimum wage determination and tie it to the consumer price index. Like, again, there are better inflation indices that I would prefer using, but at the very least tie it to the consumer price index, so you have a consistent measurement that the minimum wage is tied to, and then it stops being a political football. Then it just automatically increases as the CPI data.
And nobody can use it to
year.
gain votes or, whatever.
Yeah, it just happens.
Yeah.
And shockingly, we see that becoming the norm on the wages for politicians themselves. Right? Like, and I think that's a good thing. Like, politicians voting themselves raises is problematic. Politicians in many jurisdictions have gotten smart enough to realize that voting themselves raises doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So they've tied MP or MLA or whatever salary to inflation so that they don't have to vote themselves raises.
There
it just
you go.
happens based on the cost of living changing.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yep. All right. Sigh. I don't know. I thought in this article there was more of a bit of a history of the minimum wage. I know there was. I read something else discussing like the minimum wage when it was under the NDP, and then the Sask Party stuck to the initial changes that were planned by the NDP, and then later on they decided to limit or not change it for a few years, and then now it hasn't really increased much over the last few years. So yeah, just more of the same, I guess. So
I don't know what to tell you. Like it's again, as you said at the beginning, this should be a no-brainer, and apparently it's not.
The Sask NDP to hold a leadership vote in late June, and they capped their expenses at $200,000. Candidates must receive signatures of women or gender diverse members to qualify, which is cool. Yeah. Ryan Miley, we talked about his announcing his departure as the leader. So they need at least 100 members, half of whom must be women or gender diverse, from at least 20 constituencies. They have a non-refundable $4,000 registration fee, observe a $200,000 campaign limit, and receive approval from the Saskatchewan NDP. Which I imagine if you meet the first three, then you'll get the approval.
I think that's just sort of the
in case
what do we do if a white supremacist runs, right? Like
right, just in case.
It's what do you do if there's an unelectable person running that even if they won't actually win the leadership, will just be a distraction,
right,
during the race. And I think the party, well, hopefully the party is smart enough to know to use that element sparingly. If there's a nuisance candidate in there, unless they are going to actually bring disrepute to the party, let them run. But
yeah, that's right. And as we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Nicole Sorauer. Sorry, I'm terribly sorry. Endorsed Carla Beck as the for her option 2 run. I don't know really any other names right now.
I know both Trent Witherspoon said he wasn't running.
Betty Nippy Albright
said she wouldn't be running.
So
there was a city councillor out of Saskatoon whose name got bandied about, but I think he said he was out as well.
It might be an easy win for Carla Beck.
It might be an easy win, yeah. I don't know who else there is that would have the name recognition to really sort of go, toe to toe with her. Like at this point, you gotta think anyone who has a shot would be someone who is an MLA. Like I think if you're going up against Carla Beck, you probably have to be an MLA at least at this point.
Yeah.
So Alina Young's name comes up, but I think she's also said she's not interested at this point.
I thought she said that
pretty early on.
Yeah.
So like, who else do you got? Like, there's Mira Conway, Vicky Mowat.
Right. But
I don't know.
I haven't seen any of those names like come out as
No one's
saying
talking
that.
about them.
Yeah.
Doyle Vermette, maybe. Again, I don't know if. I believe Doyle is Indigenous. He's coming from a rural part of the province rather than like Regina or Saskatoon. So like we know the NDP has to expand out of the two big cities. So
It's true.
Like if I was to pick a sort of, I'd say, surprise candidate who might give Carla Beck a run for her money, I would probably say Doyle Vermette. I also think he's been around for quite some time. Like I think he's like as an MLA for a while.
Right.
I think he was like, I don't know, late 2000s, like 2008, 2010, one of those elections.
So around.
Yeah. So about 12, 14, 15 years, which I think is probably pretty similar to Carla Beck.
Yeah, I think so.
No, Carla Beck is looks like she was first elected in 2016, but had been involved in public life for a while. Was in the school board longer than that. So again, I don't know what other candidates we're going to see jumping forward. The conventional wisdom on party politics when there's a leadership race can go one of two ways, right? It's don't put your name out first because then you become the target for everyone else who's running, and you put a target on your back, and then it's 4 versus 1, and you end up having you end up out of the race before you actually get to election day. The other conventional wisdom is put your name out first and develop the support, and then while everyone else is thinking about it, by the time you've
already got your support.
You've already got support locked up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that might be what's happening with Carla Beck. Like most of the other names, like we've got a lot of first-time. I shouldn't say a lot of first-time MLAs, but like Alina Young, Erica Ritchie are both. I think this was their first time. Yeah. Jennifer Bowes was last time. So they're like one term in. I can't think of anyone else who's going to make a run for it. Maybe, I'm blanking on his last name, Charlie, the mayor of Saskatoon.
Kirk?
Yeah.
No,
is that
that's
it?
not right.
No.
That's not right.
I think it does start with. No. Yes, wait.
That's the right-wing pundit from his TPUSA. So that's not the same guy.
Clark. You were close.
Clark.
Yeah.
I knew they sounded similar.
So like maybe someone like Charlie Clark has enough name recognition to throw his name in. I hope he doesn't. I think we're going to be having a Carla Beck NDP.
There's still
good. I like Carla. I think she's going to be stronger than Miley was. I would have rather her won when Miley won.
Right.
But so be it. We'll see what happens.
Yep. See how she goes.
I also didn't hear anything in the news about it. So
Regina Evraz Place to be renamed the Real District. That's a terrible name.
I guess when you're having to name things in a hurry. Regina Exhibition Association Limited.
Yeah. That's terrible. I'm sorry, Regina.
The new name and logo was developed after months of consultation?
Oh, boy. Oh. But they were...
So this was something that was already intended to have happened before?
The partnership between Real and Evraz expired in May 2021, with Evraz North America deciding to decline the renewal rights. So, okay.
Okay.
So it's not Ukraine-Russia related. Oh, well.
Coincidence. And then you probably have someone out there who's in trouble for not having gotten this change happened maybe
earlier.
A month or two earlier. Shouldn't laugh. It's a horrific situation. I feel bad laughing, but like it's... Yeah. So we've got the name change.
Which is, I mean...
Yeah.
I guess...
Like...
Whatever, right?
Like Evraz is still a big player in the province, so above and beyond the name of the stadium.
The premier is not calling on sanctions against the oligarch the billionaire who owns shares in the Saskatchewan mill.
Yeah, so, but they are being sanctioned federally.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know what it's a weird one, right? Because on a federal level, I guess federally, Abramovich is being sanctioned himself. So Mo is wanting to make sure that those sanctions don't actually have an impact on the steel mill.
Right. Yeah.
Like Mo really, really wants to continue doing business with the Russians. He just doesn't like.
Well, yeah, this is a legitimate thing within the right wing, right? Yeah. People are very much. There's a lot of people who are currently saying like that Putin is justified, and like they're wrong, by the way, but they're saying it and they're attacking. They're using it to
be fair on this one. There are more than a few left wingers doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This seems to be one of those situations where you have shitty people on both sides of the spectrum deciding that Putin's their friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
if you're defending Putin, you're wrong. The end.
Yeah, there are some tankies who don't even understand what tankies are. Who are like,
they're just
there's now this weird tanky thing where it's like Russia's not even communist anymore.
Yeah,
and the tankies are supporting Russia.
And
and like, I understand the idea that like, if there's sanctions on Evraz, that affects steelworkers in Canada and steelworkers in Saskatchewan. And that is shitty. And I think like one of the things that we as a society should be doing is when there are things like economic sanctions that go against shitty people, we have systems in place so that workers are not impacted by that.
It's almost like we should be supporting workers and citizens and not billionaires from across the world. I don't know.
Yeah. But again, instead of fighting for, hey, if there are steel workers laid off because of sanctions against Evraz, we should have supports in place to make sure that they land on their feet and are not negatively impacted. Yeah. Instead, they're fighting for, no, we want to keep doing business with the Russians. We shouldn't have to stop doing business with the Russians. We shouldn't have to suffer because of sanctions. We shouldn't actually have to sacrifice anything to put sanctions in place. Unfortunately, that's not how sanctions work.
Right, exactly.
Sanctions suck. Sanctions suck for the people doing the sanctioning. If they didn't, that economic relationship wouldn't have existed in the first place.
Exactly.
That's the whole point.
That's how this works.
It hurts both sides. And one of the reasons why sanctions can be effective is if you have 100 countries sanctioning one, each one of the 100 countries has a 1% impact, and the country that's being sanctioned has a 100% impact, right? Like everyone is affected a little bit, but the country in the middle is affected a lot. But we're still affected a little.
Yeah, that's right. We're still affected. And I guess in a sense we could talk about this more when we get up to the gas prices. But that's what that is, right? Like I know a lot of people are saying, well, it's Facebook, right? So you get the people who are explicitly saying Biden doesn't have an impact on gas prices. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, but yes, sanctions that come from our governments do in fact have an impact on the oil price, which has an effect on gas prices.
Yeah, probably not to the extent, but right.
It's not 100%, right? It's not a 1-to-1 scale, but it definitely has an impact.
Yeah. So again, and there's, and once again, you can fight for putting systems in place to soften the blow.
Yeah.
I think one of the weird, cultural elements is the pride factor coming in, where you have people going, no, I as a steel worker who get laid off because of XYZ don't want to have to accept charity from my government. Like
Right.
that makes me less.
Wow.
Because I don't want to be like those welfare people.
That's
right. So there's this cultural element where we think less of those who accept government assistance. I don't want to have to be like one of those.
Yeah.
I would rather just fight against the sanctions in the first place and keep doing business with the Russians.
Yeah, there's so much
and
going
not that
on.
Evraz is exclusively owned by Russians,
Right.
but it is a Russian company.
Yeah.
And like the primary shareholder is the Russian oligarch Abramovich, who's been sanctioned. Like we do have to call a spade on that.
There's a lot going on there with the attitudes, with cultural attitudes that people have in relation to taking quote unquote handouts from the government. There's nothing wrong with expecting your government to actually support the citizens within the province. In Saskatchewan, the overdose crisis is worsening despite increased spending. An internal briefing note said that recent investments had not improved harm reduction services provided by the Saskatchewan Health Authority. And this does not mean that you should not continue to invest and perhaps invest more into harm reduction services. This simply means that it hasn't done what we hoped it would at this time. So the central message of a new report from the province's drug task force.
Yeah. And one of the things it says is like, it's not just that we increased harm reduction and it didn't do anything. There was increased spending that didn't actually translate into increased services. Like the reason why the services weren't having the impact is because the services weren't actually implemented.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there will be partisan folk on the same side as you and I who will use that as an attack on the Sask Party, and possibly somewhat justified, but also COVID plays a role in that. To give the Sask Party a 2-year respite on the criticisms for this, it is tough to implement new services within healthcare field during a pandemic.
Right.
I'm torn on saying that because like part of me is also like, that being said, if it had been a priority, like they would have, but I certainly think now that the pandemic is, according to the Sask government, over, again, it's not.
It's not.
Now maybe they can start actually implementing the services that they've set aside the money to implement.
Yeah. I'm worried, I guess, that it's going to make people who are critical of that method push to pull money. Yeah, push to pull money out of it. But
probably. I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't. Yeah. I hope the Sask Party puts lives ahead of politics. At the end of the day, like that's what's going to be required. And as much as you and I don't like the Sask Party, I still hope they actually do that. I would like to see harm reduction improve under the Sask Party because I don't want to see people die. Like that right. Should be a pretty
fair.
Cut and dry thing.
So Scott Moe says that Saskatchewan will not follow the Alberta in cutting gas tax. The NDP asked NDP finance critic Trent Wotherspoon said that Sask Party government needs to offer relief on the price of gasoline to soften the impact of other increasing costs on families. He says we're talking about an extraordinary situation and a temporary measure right now. So he wants the gas tax to be, the provincial tax on gas to be removed. And apparently, like, it surprises me to say that Alberta has done such a thing. But yeah, we're not doing it.
Yeah. And like, this is that thing where like, I'm actually agreeing with the Sask Party and disagreeing with the NDP on this one.
Yeah, like I wasn't convinced that this was the right thing to do, but I know that I'm eager for any diminished cost on the price of gasoline. So whatever it takes.
on a personal level, on what it takes for me to drive back and forth to work or drive to Saskatoon, like, agreed. I wish gas wasn't as expensive as it is on a personal level.
Right.
That said, again, sometimes things have to impact us negatively when they're the right thing. Like, gas should be more expensive than it is. I know that's probably the least popular political thing I have ever said in over a year of us doing this podcast. Gas should be more expensive than it is. Now, where that money goes probably shouldn't be into the pockets of billionaires.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So, but reducing the taxes on gas doesn't take any money out of billionaire pockets.
No, that just hurts the province, honestly.
Yeah. And it hurts the province. And like, if the province cuts 10 cents or whatever cents a liter off of tax, there's nothing stopping the gas companies from going, woohoo, our input costs are lower. Let's then increase the price, the offsetting 10 cents.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Like, again, we keep talking about how, or conservatives keep talking about how increasing minimum wage increases market price. And there are a lot of factors that sort of balance that out and make it not actually what they think it does.
Right.
But decreasing input costs often, like, yeah.
Yeah.
It won't necessarily translate into a one-to-one price at the pump if you reduce the tax, because
right. Well,
gas
it almost
will
certainly
charge
won't.
whatever they can. Gas companies want to charge as much as they can for what people will pay.
This is I think one of the same things that because conservatives use that argument against the carbon tax, right? They say, well, the carbon tax, sure, you're charging the company, you're charging the trucking company, you're charging the refinery, whatever. You're charging all these levels, and all they're doing is they're passing those costs on to the consumer. Like, they're not taking that money out of their profits, right? And it's the same thing with this. Like, these companies are never going to take the money out of their profits. If you reduce their taxes, then they're just going to make more money.
It's and again, there's gray areas on that. Like, a lot of people's idea of economics is what they learned in Economics 100 or high school economics, and doesn't have the level of complexity to it. Yeah. One of the factors is gasoline has an incredibly inelastic demand curve. And one of the things about an inelastic demand curve is it almost doesn't matter what you make the price. Like, the price of gasoline is far more impacted by public opinion than actual input costing, because people are still going to need to buy it.
Yeah.
Like, people might drive a little bit less, but not much.
No, that's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've said it before. Like, a year ago, my cost of fuel to get to work was $400 a month. This year, or last month, it was over $600, and next month it's going to be even more. And it doesn't change that I still have to drive to and from work. Like, I gotta pay it, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm buying that gas no matter what. So, Saskatchewan paid out $125 million for oil well cleanup before getting legislative approval. Auditor Tara Clement says the ministry paid $125 million to the Saskatchewan Research Council in installments in 2020 and 2021. The money was a part of a total $400 million the province has received from the federal government to help pay for such cleanups. Now, this I just came across this today, so I didn't get a chance to go through it very well. But I thought that oil well cleanups was now the companies that abandoned those wells, or the companies that were responsible for those wells, were now responsible for the cleanups. So why is the government paying this out, and why didn't they get legislative approval? Is that something that was required?
Yes, it was required. the long and the short of it.
Which it says, I guess, right there on the screen.
It requires an ordering council, so it doesn't need to get passed in the House or the legislature. Right. It just needs an ordering council, but it does need an ordering council. There's one of the points is that the cabinet and the government needs to be aware of big spending. You're not supposed to be spending that much money without the rest of the cabinet and the government knowing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Right. And it was supposed to be, yes, this was supposed to be paid for by the oil companies themselves. Because of the COVID, the federal government and the province stepped in and basically said, oh, poor oil companies, you're being hurt by this nasty pandemic, so we will give you hundreds of millions of dollars to clean up your messes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
they're being nice. Technically, the oil companies are responsible for this, right?
My understanding is, but
okay.
It was financial relief given to the oil companies because of low commodity prices and COVID-19.
Well, okay, but still, like
the federal government gave it to the province. The province has to use it on oil cleanup, cleaning up wells and reclaiming and all of that. If they don't use it, it goes back to the federal government. So it has a timeline on it. So the government does have to use it quickly. This is one of those stories where it really should be someone gets a slap on the wrist or gets told you need to start doing your job better. Bronwyn Eyre, I think, is ultimately the one who fucked up. Mm-hmm. But it's accounting fuck up. Like this was shady accounting. This was, you weren't filing the paperwork you were supposed to file. You weren't being as transparent as you were supposed to. The money ultimately ended up in the right spot, which it seems like when conservative governments do it is no big deal.
Right.
And when liberal or NDP governments do it is billion-dollar boondoggles that take down governments.
Of course, yeah.
This is in the same category as the sponsorship scandal. There was money that was spent where it was supposed to be spent. It just had bad accounting.
Right.
Now the sponsorship had worse accounting, but it was still like pretty much all of the $1 billion with the sponsorship scandal was found. Like there was issues with accounting. It wasn't envelopes full of cash ending up in people's pockets. It was
right.
Money got spent where it was supposed to be spent. The accounting wasn't very good. It got sloppy. Money wasn't being tracked, so it cost money to go back and find where it went. Same thing happened here.
Yeah.
The money was spent where it was supposed to be spent. They just weren't doing the paperwork properly.
Right.
Which shouldn't take down a government. That shouldn't be what takes down a government. Again, it did. It's what took down the Paul Martin government when it happened federally.
Yeah.
And here it's 125 million versus $1 billion, but Saskatchewan's also 1/10 the size. So, like relatively, this is
the same idea.
This is on par with the sponsorship scandal. It won't be treated. It'll be this one news article. It'll disappear.
That's right.
No one will say anything.
That's right.
The NDP, if they try and make a stink out of it, will get made fun of. Yeah. So, which again, we should probably have somewhere between those two. This should probably be hey, actually, this is a thing that should happen.
Hey, you're actually supposed to be doing this thing.
Yeah, you didn't do your job properly. You should have reported it. Maybe this is something that should result in, the next cabinet shuffle, Eyre getting moved into a less prestigious cabinet posting, like that sort of thing.
Right.
Or even moved down to out of cabinet or to a deputy minister, whatever.
The person responsible for this should face some level of consequence.
But again, this shouldn't be seen as a big blight on the Sask Party itself.
Right.
This is 2 stories in a row, or 2 stories in an episode. I've taken the Sask Party side.
Don't make a habit of it.
I shouldn't have had whiskey before the episode or something. I don't know.
Okay, and we're not really going to cover these next 2. I'm just going to mention them quick. There was a note. The federal government gave us, the province, a bunch of money for affordable housing in Regina. Great. Good stuff. And this is Premier Scott Moe's truck, or a truck with his registration.
A truck owned by the Premier.
Yes. Was pulled over and impounded because the driver was impaired.
The driver was not the Premier himself.
Was not the Premier. A 28-year-old driver. An unnamed 28-year-old last time I read.
Yeah.
So,
and he said it's a personal matter. So my guess is a family member of Scott Moe would be.
Yeah.
It was a 28-year-old. We don't know. I haven't looked at the age of Scott Moe's
No,
children.
and actually, I don't even
and I'm not
care.
going to.
Yeah, I don't care.
I think it's a family member of Scott Moe was driving his truck. And again, I will get my snark out. Continued the family tradition of
Yeah, that's right. It's perfectly good snark fodder. It's not a really big political story. It's just
it speaks to the theme though that we've kind of had out of this week's podcast. Like that's one of the ongoing themes is the political party that demands accountability from others lacks it in themselves.
Yeah,
whether it's drunk driving, whether it's driving with undue care and attention leading to death, whether it's accounting on the spending, whether it's sanctions against Russian businesses, like, you know, economic accountability when it comes to median and minimum wages. Like it's this general idea that runs through our podcast today. Like we have this political party in Saskatchewan who tries to hold everyone in the world accountable except themselves. It's a political party that is trying to hold an NDP accountable for things done by an NDP government 20 years ago, but won't hold itself accountable for the things it did a month ago, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it happens over and over and over again to a point at which it really is a pattern. And the drunk driving thing is just one more example of it.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and with that, you can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is at skpoliticspod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/frommanypeoplesstrengthpod. And our email is frommanypeoples@gmail.com. Or you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Cory, for all the work you do. Once again, making the technology work and listening to my grumpiness on a Sunday night. I got to imagine you have better things to do on a Sunday than listen to me be grumpy, but you do, and you put up with me. So I very much appreciate it.
Well, it must be something wrong with me because I enjoy it. So
fair enough. All right. Well, talk to you again in 2 weeks.
You bet. Yeah, I hope I didn't actually come across as I was actually saying "fuck you" when you were saying that the price of gas should be high.
Oh no! I think that was fine. Yeah,
I was thinking about it after I did it. I was like, I hope he didn't think I was actually saying "fuck you."
No, and it. I also don't want to be paying.
Right.
Like, I now have multiple partners in Saskatoon. I want to go to Saskatoon relatively frequently.
Right.
Like pre-pandemic, I went twice a month. I'm probably going to be going at least once a month. That the price of gas has changed that from a $50 trip to a $100 trip.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's expensive.
The price of gas means I'm not keeping pride flags up on my car anymore because the reduction in fuel economy makes a difference now.
Yeah, that's right. It actually makes enough of a difference, eh?
It actually makes enough of a difference. I think. I don't actually know for sure, but yeah, it's. Oh, why did you pause? Uploading one item.
I have to fill my car every 2 days to go to work.
Oh. Brutal.
And it's over $80 now to go 2 days. So.
Yikes.
Yeah. So working for my dad, even though it's because he's sick and that sucks, and I wish I had time to do stuff at home, working for my dad makes me enough money to help pay for the other stuff. So it's got to have a second job to maintain my first job.
Brutal.
Yeah.
You can see why people want to work from home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Well,
anyways, yeah, this will be done uploading in less than a minute at this point. So
awesome.
all right.
Thanks again.
Talk to you later.
You bet.
Bye.